Hello, Hey Boomer listeners. My name is Wendy Green. I am the host of Hey Boomer. And wherever you are listening to us from, welcome to the Hey Boomer Show. Today, we are going to be talking about imagination, creativity, the sense of wonder and awe. And it got me thinking that when we're children, being creative, having an imagination, making up games and stories and characters just seems to come naturally to us. And somewhere along the line, we tend to lose that as an adult. We start to think, well, that's, adults don't do that kind of silly stuff. But I do remember when my kids were growing up, playing a lot of imaginative games and making up stories when we would be on car trips and things like that. But here's a funny story. My daughter used to love her Barbie dolls. I was not a big fan, but she loved them, so we would play with them. And she one day said, "Well, you pretend you're the mommy." And I looked at her, I'm like, "But I am the mommy. I don't know how to pretend I am the mommy. Why don't you be the mommy?" So she was. And I'm not sure that was the best idea because I heard some of the scolding, "Bad Barbie doll," things like that. And I was like, oh dear, I probably need to change the wording of some of my corrective behavior things that I did. But imagine if you were trying to have creative play and encourage imagination with people who already have dementia or who are declining in their cognitive abilities. Dementia patients become very familiar with being corrected, like they will ask you what time it is or what day it is, and you'll say, "I just told you that." And, they forget where they laid something down, and you're like, "Well, why don't you pay attention?" Or whatever your frustration level might come back with an answer. And so the dementia patients start to, withdraw from having a connection. And what Dr. Ann Basting and Time Slips have found through years and years of work with elders and dementia patients and their care partners is that using some of these techniques we're going to talk about today, things like imagination, beautiful questions, listening so that the person feels heard, all of these can help have that connection. It may not be the same connection that you were familiar with, but it builds a connection that is really important for you and for the person with dementia. But before I bring Dr. Basting on, I want to go over some of our never too old stories. So you all remember Buzz Aldrin, the astronaut, the second man to walk on the moon right behind Neil Armstrong? That was in July of 1969. Since retiring from NASA in 1971, Buzz Aldrin struggled with alcoholism and depression, and he wrote a couple of books about his struggle. He has been sober since 1978, and he has also written 4 children's books for different age groups about his experiences with NASA and as an astronaut. He has advocated for a mission to Mars. He walked in the New York Fashion Week runway show, and he has become the oldest explorer at age 86 to reach the South Pole. On January 20th, just a couple of days ago, Buzz Aldrin turned 92. I also wanted to mention Joan Baez, who is 81 this year. She also has a January birthday. Joan Baez has been on the front lines of just about every nonviolent social justice and human rights movement in the past, 80 years. She started her career at the age of 17. She has released over 30 albums, including her latest album, released in 2018, called Whistle Down the Road. In 2017, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In 2019, she performed her final concert. Oh, sad. And in 2020, she received a Kennedy Center Honors Award. Since she retired from performing, Joan Baez has focused on the visual arts, painting and drawing, and creating art with a social conscience. So happy January birthdays to Buzz Aldrin and Joan Baez, our never too old inspiration for today. And I also wanted to remind you that we now have a Facebook group. It's a private Facebook group. It's a great place to ask questions of other boomers going through transition, trying to figure out what to do with their life, what comes next. It's a great place to be aware of what's coming on, build friendship and support. So if you're interested in becoming part of our Facebook group, just drop me an email, wendy@heyboomer.biz, and I will be glad to send you an invite. It really is a very special group of people, so I hope you become part of it. And now I want to introduce you to Dr. Ann Basting. Hello, Ann.
Hey.
Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
So Ann Basting, Dr. Ann Basting, is an artist, scholar, and educator committed to the power of the arts and culture to transform our lives as individuals and communities. She is professor of English at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where she is director of the Center for 21st Century Studies. She is founder of and a creative strategist for the award-winning nonprofit Time Slips. Basting's innovative work as both a community-engaged artist and scholar has been recognized by a MacArthur Fellowship, an Ashoka Fellowship, a Rockefeller Fellowship, and multiple major grants. She is author and editor of multiple books, including her latest, Creative Care, which is a fabulous read. I couldn't put it down. I mean, it's not a novel, but I couldn't put it down. It's a great read. And she's also written The Penelope Project and Forget Memory. Time Slips fosters an alliance of artists and caregivers, bringing meaning and joy to late life through creative engagement, and has over 970 certified facilitators in 49 states and 20 countries. Wow. And she is currently working on a project inviting wonderment to everyday moments on her Instagram page. So lots to talk about. Congratulations on all those fellowships.
Thanks. It creates an opportunity for me to do some of the work that doesn't, when I was starting out, it didn't really exist very much as a field of really trying to bring meaning making into care settings. Not therapy, in that same way where it's really seen as trying to move health along a trajectory, but really just about spirit and community building and meaning making and joy. So that's what those fellowships enabled me to do.
That's awesome. So you started in this direction very young. I mean, you were studying English and arts, and you were working in a nursing home, right?
Well, I was. I really started in grad school mostly. I did a play in my undergrad. I wrote a play with older characters because I think I just was comfortable around older people, and my grandmother in particular, and just really got to know older people and included them in my playwriting. And then really started studying it more in grad school, representations of aging. I was in a feminist theater program in my PhD and my master's program, but no one was writing about aging. It was just not a thing that was being done. So they all thought I was a little nuts because they didn't think I could, there's not a department of representations of age at the time. Now age studies is really kind of taken off a little bit more, which is great. And so I actually wrote a dissertation about representations, performances of age. What, if you think about it, what are we allowed to wear? What's, how do you act your age? There's these subtle guidelines all the way along the way, like sort of tacit rules that people kind of follow. And, oh, you hear, they're not acting their age, or, and when do people kind of fall off the stage? When are they not allowed to represent themselves anymore? And why? And I just got really fascinated by that. And so I wrote about the senior theater movement, wrote different chapters on really great performances by older performers, a Japanese Butoh dancer who was like in his 90s, just an amazing performer. And realized that all of the representations I was reading and seeing and writing about were pretty healthy people. And so, excuse me, I wanted to see if the power of theater would have a beneficial impact for people who were really seriously disabled. And so that's when I volunteered in a nursing home in Milwaukee on one of my fellowships, and just started doing theater exercises just to see what would happen. And that's when really became very clear that people with dementia, really profound, deep states of Alzheimer's and dementia, could respond to improvisational creative engagement. It's really, if you think about it, it's a language. You're inviting them to speak a language that they can speak.
So that the first improvisational exercise that you talk about in your book is that yes and. Yes. And can you go into detail on how you use that with your?
Sure. The very first moment is such a rich story, and I've told it many times, but I'll make it fresh. Is really, out of frustration, because everyone was using the approach of, and it's a sort of a second nature approach to ask people about the past, share stories of the past. Let's talk about that time we went on that trip together. Well, the person might not have access to that, or if they do, they might not have access to get it out, to talk with you about it. There's just a lot of gumming up in the brain, and sometimes different pathways are blocked. So instead, one week, I just tore a picture out of a magazine. It happened to be the Marlboro Man. And I said, let's make it up. What do you want to call him? And instead of one pathway for that information to travel, there were 1,000 different pathways, right? They could say any name in the world. It didn't matter. And
these were people with like serious dementia.
Profound serious dementia, very serious, and probably way over medicated in a very chaotic setting in a nursing home. You and I were talking before about, the 80s and what that was like. And it was a different situation in nursing homes. Some of them, unfortunately, are the same today. But, people were drugged pretty heavily. And the day room was alarms and TVs, and it was just chaos. So for someone to, participate and respond, and for us to be shaping a story about a cowboy named Fred Astaire who lives in Oklahoma, and they started to sing the musical Oklahoma, and, with his wife, Gina Autry, and their dogs. And I mean, this story went on for 45 minutes from thin air, and we made it up, and we were laughing and singing and looking at each other like, I can't believe we're doing this. And the staff was kind of gathered around us. So it's a simple shift. People get hung up on it being arts or imagine it. It's a simple shift toward away from focusing on the loss, toward really inviting out remaining strengths and using the strengths as the place to connect. And just sort of, the losses are there, and we do grieve them. But if we only focus on them, we're never going to see the strengths, and we're never going to see the ways to connect in the moment.
And you have to do the silence, right? You ask, who is this? Like, Okay, so where's the imagination kit? So part of the creative care, you can also get this imagination kit. And in it, you have a journal with instructions, you have pictures, you have questions. And so, for instance, if I was to show this picture, they're gorgeous pictures, by the way. Like, what kind of questions would I ask that might draw somebody out? And how long do I wait before I change the question?
One of the things that I think in our very busy culture, we are uncomfortable in silence and we don't like to wait. And one thing that's really important to remember is that someone experiencing dementia, it can take a while for the information to be processed and for the response to be processed to come out. And one of the reasons that people with dementia talk about just withdrawing is because it's like life is this really fast flowing river. People are talking and asking questions and then moving on, and you can never jump in. It's just so people just pull back.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just slow down the river and you reach out to the person and you just wait, and so what if it's quiet, look around, feel the air, listen to the sounds, and just be present and allow enough time for the response to come out. So from one of those images, the beautiful questions are questions that are open. They're not yes or no. They don't have a right or a wrong. And they're questions like, with that dog, I would have said, what do you see? What do you want to name it? When do you want to say it takes place? So you're giving all the creative agency to that person. Instead of saying when does it take place, which can sound a little bit like a test. When does that take place? When do you want to say it takes place? You can say any time and we'll write it down.
Subtle difference.
A subtle difference. And it's really reaffirming in the act of the question asking as well. So, and it draws, everyone's like, I'm going to learn to meditate. I'm going to learn to get into the moment. This will bring you into the moment. I'm telling you, it is sort of an act of intense presence with another person. And we talk about not just active listening, but offering proof of listening so that you echo what they're saying or write it down so they can see and correct it. So if you're actually getting it right. And then build the responses into a poem, a story. If you get movement out, you can build a movement sequence, whatever you want to do.
So if you're home and first of all, you differentiate between a caregiver and a care partner. Could you explain that?
Well, it's interesting that in the UK, they use carers, which can be hard to say, carers.
Carers.
It's like rural carer. The care partner they also use in other countries, and that's acknowledging that both people are. It's like care is an act of a reciprocity. So it's not, one person might need certain things and the other person is helping, but you can't give care if the other person isn't accepting it, right? Like it's acknowledging that caring is a two-way street. It's reciprocal. So care partner acknowledges that they're both part of the care process. Caregiver can sometimes be interpreted like this person is just giving and giving and giving and is eventually going to empty. And it is hard work, and you do have to make sure you're supported yourself as a caregiver through other people. But the danger is that you aren't seeing the reciprocity in that process, and that the person you're caring for is just empty and soaking up everything. There is a return in the care process.
And sometimes that's really hard to see, Anne, when they're like they've lost the ability to communicate, they're bedridden. Sometimes it's really hard to see that.
That's where the creativity comes in figuring out how might we be able to engage. Um, it's very, someone with a dementia diagnosis might live 10, 15 years with a dementia diagnosis. It's not usually until the very end that all communication is really gone or very, very difficult. It's a long, long time to, that you still have a lot of strengths left and capacity for communication and connection and meaning making and valued contribution to the world.
You tell a story about a man who has lost speech, and he loved going out by the ocean and collecting driftwood. And so tell the story about how you got him to communicate non-verbally.
Sure. Jim was actually the third coast. It wasn't quite an ocean. It was Lake Michigan, which looks like an ocean.
It's like an ocean.
Freshwater ocean. We do have driftwood. And he, in his cognitive journey, I'm just going to cough for a second. He was beyond language. And so I actually wasn't sure. I was coming in to meet him and work with his wife, who was caring for him at home, with some caregivers from a home care agency as well. And I wasn't sure how to ask a beautiful question if the words couldn't come back. But I did know from his wife, Fran, that he loved to walk along the lakefront. And in the kitchen, there were little pieces of driftwood that he had gathered. And I asked him, "Can you show me how water moves?" And we waited patiently. And he picked up a piece of driftwood and then started moving it really slowly. And I started realizing he was doing it as though the driftwood was moving across the top of the water in the way that wood would be buoyed by the waves. And all of us, his wife, Fran, and the caregivers, we were all just like eyes wide, stunned at how beautiful it was, what he was doing. And it became really a dance. And then he set one piece down, and then he introduced us to another piece of driftwood, and then began the journey with the next one. It was like a half an hour long. It was just amazing. And that's the kind of thing, if you just see the loss, we never would have had that moment.
Yeah.
Never would have found it.
It's so amazing. I think the most amazing stories in your book, and there's so many of them, but the stories of the plays, the performances that you put on, and this wasn't just like, okay, well, here's a script and let's act. This was like a 2-year long project to put this together.
Yeah.
There's 2 of them that you talk about. Would you pick one and tell us about it?
Yes, I'll do the most recent one because to me, it's probably, it's just such a heartache because we finished it in 2019 and then the lockdown happened, and then all of the tragedy in the nursing homes. And it just opened up all of these nursing homes to what was possible. We worked with Signature Healthcare in Kentucky with 12 rural nursing homes. And what the first layer was to train the quality of life staff in how this is possible. If you reorient from directing activities to inviting discovery and asking beautiful questions, and then slowly building a project out of what comes out, that we had to train and open up the staff first and get them to recognize their own creativity. So our team of artists did a training, we visited 3 of the nursing homes across rural Kentucky. It was quite quite a journey in our little van with a mighty band of artists. And we used as a prompt the story of Peter Pan. We wanted to pick a story that people felt they knew by heart. Even people with cognitive challenges would feel somehow that the story, they knew it already in some way. So we asked, we found themes, we asked beautiful questions, one of which is in the imagination kit. If you could just lift up and fly anywhere right now, where would you go? We asked a lot of questions about the meaning of childhood, the senses of childhood, like the tastes and the games, and then the same thing with adulthood, exploring these two phases of life that are in conflict in that story. And then together, after the staff really took it on and they held their own workshops, and then we just tried to keep up with all the creativity that was coming out from them. And then we figured out how to share it in a story that everyone in the nursing home, all the staff, all the residents could be part of. And that's tricky. But the premise was Wendy is on hospice. She's been living at the nursing home for many years and is finishing her journey. And the residents and the staff just love her. She's been telling stories of Neverland forever, and they all think she's a little off. They don't believe her, but they want to honor her, so they want to restage the stories. So everyone's in on it. They've made all their own costumes. They welcome in the audience to these different stations where they can participate in learning to fly, thinking positive thoughts and writing them on clouds, sharing their fears, shedding their fears so that they can fly. It was such a magical experience. And it not only drew on the strengths and the creativity of the residents, but also the staff. One of them, a director of nursing at one of the sites, wrote an original song. And we tapped into local musicians in each of the places, and they played the song, and it was magical, truly magical.
I wish I could share pictures, but if you go to timeslips.org, there are pictures that you will find there of the Wendy production.
Wendy's Neverland. Yeah.
Wendy's Neverland.
Yeah.
And I mean, you'll see people in wheelchairs and children. There's children in it too, little fairies, and from the caregiver families and the staff and the pirates. And I mean, it's an amazing production, and 2 years in the making.
Yeah.
COVID shut you down. So what are your dreams for that now, hopefully, as we move out of this pandemic?
I think it's a little bit of keeping the dream alive. And the basic thing that we did, because, people get overwhelmed by the story of that project, which frankly, it was insane. It was a huge project.
Huge.
That just the team and the staff and the people who bought in so fully to have a chance to transform it's really, a health center, a health-oriented center that no one wants to be in, right? It's a stigmatized health center. Turning it into a cultural center where the neighbors and the families want to come in to do something meaningful and make beauty. I mean, that's what we were doing. And that's what we succeeded in. And I think the biggest dream I have is to keep that kernel alive in all of this crisis with nursing homes. When people are aware of just how important it is to have meaningful engagement, people just weren't flourishing. Even if they didn't get the disease, if they didn't get COVID, they were languishing because they didn't have meaningful connection. That we can make these places into cultural centers by opening up meaning making. And that can happen in people's individual homes. It can happen, the nursing home is just kind of such a stigmatized place. It's really powerful to transform it because it makes you realize what's possible.
Yeah, and I think I saw on Time Slips that you're looking to you don't have to do the whole production, right? There are pieces and ways
Yeah.
to add that creativity in.
Yeah.
And meaning making, I mean, that's something that we talk a lot about as older adults too, that when you retire from your work, you lose your identity in a lot of ways. You lose your sense of purpose. What am I going to do now? How do I still feel relevant and useful? And I think finding meaning and purpose is a big part of everybody's journey. And brings me to that other part of your story with activism, because I have always been somewhat of an activist. And, one of my biggest fears has been getting feeble. I'm with a walker, I'm in a wheelchair, I won't be able to go out and do the things that I want to do and make a difference. And there was a story in your book about activist, feeble older adults. And I was like, yes, I can still be active. So can you share that story with us?
Sure. I think just because you're wrestling with disability, just because you ride a chair or, lean on a walker when you walk for support, doesn't mean you care less about the kind of world you want to live in, or you want the next generation to live in. That is completely disconnected. And
Mm-hmm.
some of the most powerful activism has come from the disability justice movement,
That's true.
in the last couple decades. And we for some reason don't associate disability with older people with activism, and yet
Right.
disability activism with younger people we associate it. It's kind of an interesting thing, as though the closer you are to the end of your life, the less important it is to you of what happens in the world. It just, that doesn't compute, because it's really important for some older people to lay claim and to keep shaping the world around them, especially for the next generations, multiple generations. So we did a project that came out of a senior center that had taken up the cause of safe walking, because older adults there were a couple of bad incidents in Milwaukee where older adults were getting hit by cars, and people were scared, and not a great tradition of stopping for pedestrians in in our community. So we thought, I bet performance and the arts could amplify that and help raise awareness of that issue. They were having trouble. Their alderman had said, "What do you want me to do? Catch the bad guys or make them stop for pedestrians?" And we're like, why is that a choice that we have to make? Can't we do both? So I went out at the time. I have relationships in Milwaukee with a lot of long-term care communities, and we held workshops about this. What would you say to a driver if we were going to try to expand the dialogue? Because right now the dialogue between pedestrians and drivers involves, middle fingers and profanity. And we wanted to go a little deeper. What would it be? And this woman who was very, very bent over and riding a wheelchair said, "I'm worth stopping for." And I'm just like,
That's it.
So we really, what we wanted to do was identify some intersections and then have a performance where we could invite older people to be seen in the crosswalks. So we designed in Milwaukee, there are bridges that open up so that boats can go through. So we did our own little crossing. We didn't end up doing the bridge parts themselves, but we did have the guardrails and the alarm in triangles and big PVC pipe. And then we made a boat. We made ship sails that you could hold on to. And we invited elders from the neighborhood. We had workshops on how to empower pedestrians, and we had crossings, and we had a ship captain, and we played silly music, like a playlist that was all songs about the water and, Sailing by Christopher Cross, and silly stuff. We sang sea shanties. It was just silliness, but it was great fun. And we invited all of the elected officials from those 3 different crossings in 3 different municipalities, and they all came. County supervisors and aldermen, and the mayor showed up. The head of public health showed up. It was great. And nothing makes the point more quickly than if an elected official cannot make it across the intersection in the timing of the lights because they're too short, and you're scared. You develop fear for the people you're crossing with. Like, is everyone okay? Is everyone okay? And boy, I tell you, those lights got lengthened. The duration of the walk signs got lengthened, and a couple of them really changed the way that they looked at intersections to get them redesigned. Now, COVID, unfortunately, increased reckless driving in our community exponentially. So we're starting at scratch, but
Oh dear.
it really did raise awareness, and we sent out through Meals on Wheels and a bunch of other systems cards asking if there was a intersection you wish you could cross, but feel it isn't safe. Where would you like to cross? And we got hundreds and hundreds of answers. And so we mapped them all and we gave it to the mayor and we said, this is data of yearning. It's not crash data. This isn't where, the crashes are happening, where you have to change it to avoid crashes. It's where people have given up. They don't even try anymore. They're staying in their houses. And that's part of the problem of the health of your city. So it's a really powerful approach to activating the voices of older adults who, with Meals on Wheels, they're not really out and about, able to get out to be active citizens in that way. So you just need to be creative about how to hear the voices of older adults who are valued citizens and we want to activate.
Yeah, I know. And you just do the most amazing things, very creative and caring. The caring comes through. And, you've been doing this for so long, and just because it felt
lovely
like
gray hair.
well, just because you felt like this was your calling, this was the right thing to do. But now it's become personal. Your mom has been diagnosed, and you include a letter that you wrote to your boys. And I'm wondering, there's the academic side of, this is how we teach you, these are the beautiful questions, here's the kit and all. How different is that when you try and implement this on a personal level?
The learning to grieve and be creative at the same time, that's really hard.
That's really hard.
So that the grieving doesn't stop you. It's not like you don't notice that you're sad, that this is the situation, but you also, especially now, I think that's a new thing in COVID, is like, you have this moment. The person is still alive in front of you. And how do you reach them while you have this precious time? Because it's not going to be here. It's not going to last. Mm-hmm. And so how do you experience both feelings and not let the sorrow or the recognition of what's no longer there, like, don't let it stop you from walking around. I talk about, you walk around the wall of memory in order to reach the person. Because we are the holders of all of those stories. When the person doesn't have that ability to link moments chronologically anymore, the person who's with them, who has those memories, can do that. And so you feel like you want to do that for that person, but that doesn't necessarily find the present moment connection. It's really the imagination. And I have to say, one of the things that's been amazing is that my father, who is caring for my mom, has of course very kindly read all of my work, and he's kind of amazing at it. And so
Really?
when I have a hard time, he just steps right in, and that's a important reminder that you need a team. You know, you need a
Yeah.
team in some way, and if you don't have other family members who are supportive, home care, and train a home care worker in this, give them the kit. We Time Slips has all kinds of trainings, and there's other programs out there too. And you can't do it alone.
Yeah. And I think, as you were mentioning, combining the grieving with the beautiful questions, I know when my father was in hospice, it was part of journaling that saved me, that I could be there for him, but then I could walk away and express all of my fears and sadness in my journal, which helped. And it helped after he passed as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that the Hey Boomer show is all about finding meaning and purpose and being engaged no matter how old we get. We're never too old. I'm sure you'd have some good never too old stories for me. But are there one or two takeaways that you would like to leave with the audience?
I think one of the best takeaways is, for people who are looking for meaning and purpose. I think older people, and I'm not. I think I'm 2 years shy of a boomer, but I'm in that time period myself. People are afraid that working with people with dementia or doing this work in care settings or volunteering in those situations is depressing, and they're wrong. It is the most nourishing, powerful experience, and I've been doing it for almost 30 years, and it is profound. And I would say it can give you, as a volunteer or a worker or a partner, incredible meaning. And meaning is possible for the older adults themselves, for the people going through experiencing dementia as well. That meaning making is possible if you figure out these techniques to open it up.
And I suspect it's meaning making for both parties, right? You say
That
it's
care partnership.
profound. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's profound for the care partners on both sides.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for all that you do and all that you brought to us today. I want to let people know how they can reach you. So the Time Slips website, timeslips.org, has so much information about the trainings, some ideas for things that you can try at home, pictures of Wendy's Neverland project, and you can so use it as a resource. But you can also, if you have questions, you can email Anne at info@timeslips.org, and she will get your emails.
Yep.
She also has a website, anne-basting.com, where you can watch her TED Talk. So if you want to go there, and
there's also pictures of the crossings too on the projects page there. So if you want to see that, you could
on Time Slips or on your personal
on annebasting.com.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So let me tell you who's coming next week. So next week is a woman named Francine Hachem. I'm not exactly sure. I'm going to have to ask her how you pronounce it. And Francine has done some major life transformations. She moved to Greenville from Detroit to a tiny home community. She created a theater program at the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at Furman University. She is very active in the social justice movements here around town. She is feisty and entertaining, and I think you will all enjoy hearing what she has to say. So that is January 31st. And I'm excited to tell you about the 6-week online group coaching workshop that's going to be starting on February 22nd, where we're talking about transitions to your next act. So if you have an inner voice telling you you're too old to try something, well, now we know that's not true. If you want to feel meaningful and relevant in this next act, but you have no idea how to do that, if you wonder if time is running out for you to do some of the things that you've always dreamed about, if you have no idea how you're going to answer the question when people say, so what do you do? This is the workshop for you. So if you are interested in finding out more, having a conversation with me about it, just drop me an email at wendy@heyboomer.biz. Also, if you want to join our Facebook group, email me at wendy@heyboomer.biz, and we can continue conversations about things like what we talked to Anne about today. So thank you all for tuning in today. I know that you all have busy lives, and as some of you have said, this is a very important topic, and it gives you a whole different perspective on how to deal with friends and loved ones who are experiencing dementia. So thank you for joining in. And as I always remind you, we are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. Thank you so much, Anne, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me on.
My name is Wendy Green, and this has been Hey Boomer.